A small fire crackled within a circle of carefully arranged stones, the flames dancing with life against the encroaching darkness. As the sun sank below the horizon, a chill swept through the air, causing Gareth to huddle closer to the flickering warmth. The fire's glow painted shadows across the dense underbrush surrounding their temporary campsite. Penn had just finished clearing a small patch of ground beneath the shelter of a dense canopy near the river, and she turned to Gareth, brushing some stray leaves from her fatigues. "I'm going to take a dip and wash off. Keep an eye on the fire, all right?" she said, glancing toward the river where the water sparkled invitingly under the last rays of sunlight. Gareth raised an eyebrow, a teasing smirk playing on his lips. "If it explodes and I meet a fiery end, I'll haunt you for sure." Yeah, I'm sure you will. But does Whalon culture even believe in spirits? Penn asked, a playful glint in her eye. No, but yours does, so, Gareth replied, shrugging lightly. Penn chuckled, shaking her head as she stepped closer to the water's edge. Fair enough. With a swift motion, she began to remove her fatigues, but paused and looked back at Gareth with a raised eyebrow. "Do you mind?" she asked, a hint of mischief in her tone. "HM? Oh. My apologies. I didn't mean to." I know. Now, she twirled her finger in a playful gesture, signaling him to turn away. Gareth complied, focusing on the fire. He had never closely inspected an open flame before, much less one this large. As he watched the fire flicker and sway, he found its hypnotizing nature both fascinating and unsettling. The warmth radiated against his skin, a welcome comfort, but he couldn't shake the unease of being so close to something so wild and unpredictable. He could hear Penn wade into the water, the soft splashes accompanied by a satisfied sigh. "Oh, that's nice," she called out, her voice laced with relief. You aren't injured, are you?" Gareth asked, his concern evident even as he kept his eyes fixed on the fire. "A couple of scrapes and bruises, but I'll be fine." "How about you?" "I didn't crush anything, did I?" "Not again, at least," she replied, her voice echoing softly against the water. No. I appreciate the care you took. Just some aches in my hands from holding on so tightly as we fell, but nothing serious." He glanced back at her, noticing the way the water glistened on her skin. "Good," she said, her tone lightening. "I suppose I should be thanking you once again. You really seem to be making a habit of saving my life." "I believe this is the third time now?" Gareth noted, allowing a teasing smile to surface. "Second time." "And really, don't mention it," she replied with a wave of her hand, brushing off his gratitude. "Your math might be off, Penn. There was the turret, that sniper on Raxia, and now this." "That's 3, he insisted, leaning slightly closer to the fire. Raxia doesn't count. I'm not sure either of us was in real danger then. It just doesn't add up, she said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. Why is that? Gareth asked, curious. Because we're here, aren't we? They could have hit me first. You might have gotten to cover, but there's no way that slime ball was escaping unscathed. And yet, they didn't. Why? He pressed, trying to understand her reasoning. Dunno. Not my problem, not my circus, not my monkeys, she replied with a shrug, her carefree attitude returning. Gareth laughed, shaking his head. Interesting saying, but I think I understand. Are you serious, though? You really don't care? I care, but I did my job. More than that, actually. I was supposed to be relaxing on Raxia right now, enjoying the peace and quiet. Instead, here I am, jumping out of a ship on an impromptu camping trip with you, she said with a mock exasperation, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. So you won't be staying with the crew permanently? Gareth asked, a hint of concern creeping into his voice. Suddenly, his interest in the fire faded, replaced by a growing sense of unease. I didn't think it was ever permanent. No offense, it's been nice, nicer than I let on. But I'm clearly a bad luck charm for you guys. It's best if I step aside when I can, Penn admitted, her voice softening as she stared into the water. I see, Gareth replied, a heavy silence hanging between them.
He could hear the rush of water as Penn stepped out of the river, the soft squelch of her feet meeting the muddy bank. After a moment of shuffling, he could hear her heavy footsteps returning. A bundle of clothes passed over him, landing against the base of a nearby tree, and she plopped down next to him with a contented sigh. Gareth couldn't help but let his gaze wander. He had been growing more curious about the tattoos he had noticed on Penn during their travels. Many humans wore clothing that exposed their arms and lower legs, but Penn consistently opted for more coverage. Now, as she settled beside him, he realized that the marks he had glimpsed before were not mere patterns. The underclothes she wore revealed the tattoos that adorned her skin. On her left arm at the shoulder was a striking tattoo of a three-headed dog. Each head was separated by a star, and a banner wreathed around its neck, though the writing was illegible from his angle. Above the center head was a date. Gareth realized he must have been staring for longer than he intended, as he suddenly felt her eyes on him. She looked at him expectantly, a slight smile playing on her lips. Your shoulder, he stammered, feeling a mix of curiosity and embarrassment. Tattoo, she clarified, tilting her head slightly. What does it signify? He asked, his interest piqued. The three-headed dog represents Fire Team Cerberus. Every member gets this mark when they join. It comes from the same collection of myths that includes Scylla. He's depicted as the guardian of the underworld, a fierce creature that watches the gates of hell, she explained, her eyes shining with pride. Impressive. Taking on the fear that such a myth instills as part of your identity. Gareth mused, intrigued by the symbolism. I suppose that was the intent. Same goes for the names Charybdis, Scylla. I once knew a sniper who went by Grim Reaper, she replied, her expression turning nostalgic. Gareth's gaze wandered down her arm, spotting a deep scar that ran from her elbow to just above her hand. He also noticed an unusual mottling pattern on her right leg, stretching from just above her knee to her ankle. What? He hesitated, unsure of how to ask about the marks. She met his gaze, her eyes steady. Then, with a finger, she directed his attention to the scar on her arm. Nasty encounter with a knife. It was a long operation, and my armor was completely wrecked. The gauntlet had fallen off, and he was aiming to take my whole arm at the joint. He didn't succeed, but he managed to leave a mark as I pivoted away, she explained, her tone matter-of-fact. And he pointed to her right leg, wanting to know more. Thermite burned through a section of a wall next to me during a ship action. Part of the wall fell on me and pinned me down, starting to burn through my armor before Mac and Nurse could get it off. It could have been a lot worse, though, she added, her expression reflecting the weight of her experiences. And then, she continued, straightening and pointing to 2 circular discolored depressions in her abdomen. These were my first scars, clean shots that went straight through. Gareth examined the marks closely, fascinated by the stories etched into her skin. It was strange to see how the healing process worked. The injuries were brutal, potentially lethal to him, yet all that remained were simple scars. He had always imagined humanity's durability as a kind of impenetrable armor, an idealized fantasy. But the reality was far more complex. "Do they hurt?" he asked, feeling a sudden need to know more. It was a question he felt compelled to ask, despite knowing it might seem silly. During? Absolutely. Now? Not at all, she replied, shaking her head with a hint of a smile. He had a thought, recalling the footage he had seen of her enduring serious injuries, but noticing no lasting marks afterward. Not all injuries leave a mark? He inquired, curious about the extent of her experiences. No, I suppose not. I've broken a few bones. You wouldn't see those without an X-ray. Took a nasty hit to my hand once. Every now and then I lose feeling in... She noticed his gaze darting to her left hand. She raised it, massaging the palm. Along the palm, and in my ring and pinky fingers. How'd that happen? He asked, replaying the footage in his mind, trying to piece together the stories of her resilience. I picked a fight with the Terran version of a combat frame. A fist fight, to be precise. Well, I had my hatchet, but... She chuckled, the sound lightening the mood. Gareth gazed into the fire, watching the flames consume the wood, their warmth enveloping him. You all right? She asked, breaking his reverie. HM? Yeah, he replied with a chuckle. You would pick a fight with a machine? Penn laughed too, a genuine sound that echoed in the quiet of the night. I suppose I would. Anyway, we should get some rest. If you want to sleep first, I'll stay up, or... No, you should sleep. Waylons don't need to, remember? I'll keep watch. Rest, and when you're up, we can head out again, Gareth insisted, feeling a sense of duty wash over him. Right. That's so strange. All right. Yell if anything tries to eat you, she said with a wink, grabbing her clothes and stuffing them under her head as she settled into a comfortable position, lying down with her back to the fire. Gareth took a deep breath, the crisp air filling his lungs. He began his watch, taking a sip of water. It was refreshing but lacked sodium. He knew he'd be fine for a while and left the rest for Penn in the morning. He tried to avoid looking at his friend, not wanting to be accused of staring. But after a few minutes, he couldn't help it. Something odd drew his attention. She started to twitch. At first, he thought it might be dreams or nightmares. He felt a pang of sympathy, knowing how they could plague her. But these movements seemed different. They were subtle, peaceful even, just small twitches, a leg here, a shoulder there. She seemed to work through each limb until finally, she settled again and began to snore softly. He remembered Tunny T talking about snoring. It was a simple blockage of air, if he recalled correctly. While it almost sounded like she was growling, he understood what it was. The twitching, though, was peculiar. He would have to ask Tunny T about that later. As the night deepened, Gareth felt a sense of calm settle over him, the crackling fire a comforting companion against the vastness of the dark forest. He glanced around their campsite, the moonlight filtering through the trees, casting silvery shadows on the ground. The rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant sounds of nocturnal creatures created a serene backdrop, but the shadows seemed to dance menacingly, reminding him of the dangers that lurked in the night. Lost in his thoughts, Gareth couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility he felt for Penn. He had seen how she handled herself in combat, her determination and strength shining through. Yet, he couldn't help but wonder how deep the scars ran, both visible and hidden. He had his own past, but hers was a tapestry woven with danger and survival. He was grateful for her companionship, yet he worried that he had dragged her into peril.
As the fire crackled and popped, Gareth found himself reflecting on their journey so far. Each mission had tested their limits, pushing them to adapt and grow. They had faced insurmountable odds together, forged a bond that transcended mere friendship. But he sensed that Penn bore the weight of more than just their shared battles. In that quiet moment, as he kept watch over the sleeping figure of his friend, Gareth made a silent vow to protect her, no matter the cost. With thoughts of their next adventure swirling in his mind, he leaned back against the rough bark of a nearby tree, the warmth of the fire keeping the shadows at bay. Tonight, they would rest, but tomorrow they would face whatever lay ahead together.